My name is Margot Hayes, and until the morning of my husband's funeral, I believed I understood my life. I believed I knew love, loss, and the shape of grief. I was wrong. The day Ernest was buried was the quietest day of my existence, not because there were few people. The church was full, friends, neighbors, distant relatives, people who hadn't called us in years. But silence has a weight, and that day it pressed against my chest so hard I could barely breathe. The sky over Spring Creek was the color of wet ash, no sun, no wind, even the birds seemed to have agreed to stay away. I stood beside the casket with my hands folded so tightly, my fingers went numb inside the polished wood box. Lay the man I had shared 42 years with, or at least the man I was told was my husband. Ernest Hayes, bicycle repairman, devoted father, the only person who had ever truly seen me. They said the heart attack was sudden, peaceful, that he hadn't suffered. I remember thinking how strange that word sounded, peaceful. Nothing about that day felt peaceful. I was staring at the brass handles of the casket when my phone vibrated in my purse. At first I ignored it. Who sends messages during a funeral? Then it vibrated again and again, short, urgent pulses like a trapped heartbeat. Something in my chest tightened. I excused myself quietly and stepped a few feet away from the crowd near the old maple tree that shaded the cemetery. My hands were shaking as I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Unknown number. The message was short: I am still alive, trust. No one. For a moment, the world tilted, my vision blurred, and I had to grip the tree trunk to stay upright. I read the message again, slower this time, as if reading it carefully might turn it into something sensible. Still alive. My breath came out in a thin, broken sound. I typed back with trembling fingers. Who is this? The reply came almost instantly. That's not me. In the casket, my knees buckled. I lowered myself onto the cold grass, not caring that my black dress was getting dirty. This isn't funny, I typed. My husband is dead. The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I can't explain, they're watching. Don't trust anyone. Then, after a pause, one more message, especially not our sons. The phone slipped from my hand and landed face down in the grass. I stared ahead, my mind screaming, refusing to make sense of the words. Our sons, Charles and Henry, the boys I had carried, raised, protected, the boys who were standing only a few yards away beside the casket, with strangely calm expressions. I forced myself to stand. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I walked back slowly, every step heavy. When I reached them, Charles put an arm around my shoulders. His touch was stiff, rehearsed. Henry stood on my other side, his eyes dry, his jaw tight. They smelled of cologne and cold air, not grief. Something was wrong. Their tears seemed forced, their condolences hollow, their hugs as cold as ice. For 42 years, Ernest had been my partner, my refuge, my reason for living. I met him when I was 24 in the small town of Spring Creek. We grew up on the same dusty back roads, sharing modest dreams. I cleaned houses to support my sick mother, while Ernest repaired bicycles in a small shop he inherited from his father. We were poor, but we were happy. We had something money couldn't buy: real love. I remember the first time he spoke to me. It was a Tuesday morning. I was walking toward the market in my faded green dress and worn-out shoes. He stepped out of his shop with grease-stained hands and smiled at me with a shyness that made me fall in love with him instantly. Good morning, Margot, he said in a soft voice. Need me to check out your bike? I didn't even own a bike. But I came up with an excuse, just to talk to him. That conversation turned into dates under the big old oak tree in Town Square Park, then into promises of eternal love, and finally into a simple wedding full of hope. The first few years were hard. We lived in a 2-bedroom house with a tin roof. When it rained, we set out pots all over the house to catch the leaks, but we laughed through it. Ernest would joke that one day we'd have so many pots we could start a band. Money was tight, but our hearts were full. Charles was born first, a quiet, thoughtful child. Then Henry 2 years later, louder, sharper, always wanting more. Ernest adored them. He worked longer hours fixing bikes, sometimes old radios, anything people brought him, just to make sure the boys had what they needed. As the years passed, the shop grew, our life stabilized. But something else changed, slowly, almost invisibly. Our sons grew distant, especially from earnest disagreements, started over small things, money, choices, control. I tried to smooth things over, but I often felt like I was standing between two sides, pulling myself apart to keep peace. Ernest never spoke badly of them, but late at night, I would feel him staring at the ceiling, tense, worried about something. He never shared with me. A week before his supposed death, he had been restless, checking his phone, locking his office door, something he had never done in decades. I asked him what was wrong. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Just getting old, Margot, don't worry about me now." Standing at his funeral, that unease came rushing back, stronger, sharper. I slipped my phone into my purse and said nothing, but my heart was racing. The rest of the service passed like a blur, words, prayers, dirt hitting, would each sound echoing too loud in my ears. When it was over, Charles insisted on driving me home. Henry said he'd handle the paperwork. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. That night, alone in our bedroom, surrounded by Ernest's things, his sweater, his watch, his smell, I took out my phone again. No new messages. I stared at the dark screen and whispered, "Ernest, if this is you, please tell me what to do." The phone vibrated once, unknown number again. "Stay quiet, act normal. I will contact you soon. Do not trust them." My hands clenched around the phone as tears finally came, silent, shaking tears. Because deep down, somewhere beneath the fear, a terrifying thought was taking shape. If my husband was alive, then the man in the grave was a stranger, and the people I thought I knew best might be capable of something unforgivable. The house felt wrong without Ernest. Not empty, wrong, as if the walls themselves were listening. That first night after the funeral, I didn't sleep. I lay on our bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly, squeaking with each turn, the same sound it had made for years. Ernest always said he would fix it tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. Every creak of the floor made my heart jump. Every passing car outside made me hold my breath. I kept my phone on my chest like a lifeline, the screen dark but heavy with meaning. Around 3 in the morning, it buzzed again. Unknown number. One line only. "They will come tomorrow, say nothing." I sat up instantly, my mouth dry, my fingers numb. Who they were I already knew. My sons. At breakfast time, I forced myself to act normal. I made coffee, burned the toast, cursed softly, just like any other day. I even set Ernest's mug on the table. Before realizing what I'd done, my chest tightened. But I didn't cry, not then. I couldn't afford to. Around 10, there was a knock on the door. 3 firm taps. Charles and Henry stood outside, dressed casually, too casually, for men who had buried their father the day before. Charles smiled, that same careful smile he'd worn at the cemetery. Henry didn't smile at all. "We thought we'd check on you, Mom," Charles said, stepping inside without waiting for an answer. Henry followed his eyes, scanning the room, not at me, but at the walls, the shelves, Ernest's study door. "I'm fine," I said too quickly, "just tired." Henry nodded slowly. "You shouldn't be alone right now," he said. "You can stay with one of us for a while." The words sounded kind, but his tone was hard-edged, rehearsed. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket, but I didn't look. "I'm not leaving my home," I said. "This is where your father built his life." Charles's jaw tightened just for a second before he relaxed again. "Of course, Mom," he said. "We just worry." They sat at the kitchen table, where Ernest used to read the paper. Charles talked about estate matters, paperwork, insurance. Henry kept asking about Ernest's shop, where the keys were, what accounts he used, how much cash he kept there. Each question felt like a small cut. "Your father never kept secrets from us," Henry said, watching my face closely. "Did he tell you anything before he died?" My heart pounded, but I kept my expression calm. No, I lied, he was tired, that's all. They stayed for an hour before leaving. As soon as the door closed, I locked it and slid down against it, gasping. My phone buzzed again. Good, you did well. I whispered into the empty room. Where are you? The reply came slower this time. Not safe to say. I didn't plan this, Margot. I discovered something. They found out. Tears blurred my vision. Are you hurt? I typed. No, but someone else is dead because of me. That sentence haunted me. All day I moved through the house like a ghost, touching Ernest's things, his tools, his notebooks, the old photo albums. In the study late that afternoon, I heard a faint buzzing sound from behind the wall near his old workbench, the same wall he'd repaired last winter, saying it was drafty. My heart raced. I pressed my ear against it, then knocked softly, hollow. I pulled at the panel and felt it shift. Behind it was a small metal box taped carefully out of sight. Inside were documents, photos, and a second phone. My hands shook as I turned it on. Messages, unread, numbers, dates, bank transfers, names I didn't recognize. Then a video. Ernest's face filled the screen, thinner, more serious than I'd ever seen him. Margot, if you're watching this, then something has gone terribly wrong, he said quietly. I couldn't tell you before because the less you knew, the safer you were, but our sons, they're involved in something illegal, dangerous. I tried to stop them. They wouldn't listen. They threatened me. I went to the authorities. But before anything could happen, someone died by mistake. They needed a body. They needed me gone. I covered my mouth to keep from screaming. I'm alive because a good man helped me disappear, but I don't know how long I can stay hidden. Trust no one, not even blood. The video ended. I collapsed into the chair, shaking. Everything made sense now. The calm at the funeral, the rush to control, the paperwork, the questions. My sons had buried a stranger in their father's place. That night I received another message. They are running out of time. So am I. What do? I typed through tears. You must appear weak, grieving, confused. Let them believe they've won. Meanwhile, I need proof to expose them. How? I asked. A pause, then the shop, the old safe beneath the floor. My stomach dropped. I knew the one. Ernest had installed it years ago beneath a loose plank. The next morning I went to the shop alone. It smelled like oil, dust, and memories. I knelt down, lifted the plank, and opened the safe. Inside were ledgers, flash drives, and a small revolver. I recoiled at the sight of it but took the drives. As I stood up, the bell above the door rang. Henry stood there watching me. Mom, he said softly, what are you doing here alone? My blood ran cold, but I forced a smile. I just wanted to feel close to your father. His eyes flicked to the open floor, then back to me. You shouldn't be here, he said, stepping closer. At that moment, my phone vibrated once in my pocket. One word. Run. My heart slammed so hard against my ribs I thought Henry could hear it. The shop suddenly felt too small, the air thick with oil and dust and fear. I forced myself to stay still, because running too fast would confirm his suspicions. I just wanted to remember him here, I said quietly, my voice shaking just enough to seem real, not enough to seem guilty. Henry watched me for a long moment, his eyes sharp, calculating, then he stepped aside. Come home, Mom, he said. You shouldn't be alone. I nodded and walked past him slowly, every step measured. When I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly. It took me 3 tries to unlock the door. I drove away without looking back. That night, Charles came over alone with food and soft words, and concern that felt rehearsed. He sat across from me in the living room and said, Henry thinks you're not handling things well. I met his eyes and said nothing. We just want what's best for you, he continued. There are things you don't understand. I almost laughed at that. After he left, I locked every door and turned off the lights. My phone vibrated again. They know you went to the shop, Ernest wrote. I don't have much time, neither do you. I told him about Henry, about the safe, about the drives. Good, he replied, that's enough. The next morning, police cars filled our street. Neighbors whispered curtains moved. Charles and Henry were handcuffed on my front lawn, their faces pale, furious, confused. The evidence from the drives, the financial trails, the body identified as a drifter paid to fake records, it all came together. Henry screamed that I betrayed them. Charles wouldn't look at me. Hours later, in a quiet room at the station, Ernest walked in, older, thinner, alive. When he said my name, my knees gave out. He held me like he never would let go. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I cried for the man I lost, and the man I found, and the sons I never truly knew. Today I live quietly again in Spring Creek. The shop is closed, the house is peaceful, and every morning I wake up grateful for the truth, even when it hurts, because love, real love, survives even the darkest lies.